Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Wendy Parsley. I'm with All Raise. We'll get started in just 2 seconds, or 2 minutes or so, as folks are getting logged into the webinar. Please get yourself comfortable. We have a fantastic lineup and conversation planned today. We're thrilled to see you all joining us. As you're getting settled, and before we kick things off, if you would take a minute in the chat at the bottom of the screen and tell us where you're joining from today. Our topic is in Miami, but I think we're secretly hoping, or not so secretly hoping, that we've got folks who are not in Miami joining us. So where are you today? Let us know. Chicago. Oh, Buenos Aires. Amazing. Fantastic. Also, while everybody is getting logged in, oh wow, we got some South Carolina, Fort Lauderdale, fantastic. Good representation. Excited about this. Before I pass the baton to our moderator today, I just wanted to highlight a couple of, I realized I was way ahead of my slides, sorry. All Raise had a huge announcement today. It's a big day for the All Raise team, and I just wanted to highlight the biggest news for today from All Raise is we just launched a brand new masterclass program that you can enroll for totally free, no cost to you at all. It is a new program that is designed to give you some pro tips on how to fundraise from top female investors and funders who have been there and done that. So please take a moment to check out the links and the information either on LinkedIn, Twitter, or on the All Raise website, and would love for you to get to know the All Raise Masterclass program even more. Then the other thing that I wanted to point out for everybody today is a huge thank you to our founding partners and our national partners. We could not do any of these programs without their support, and they're just always in our corner, and so a shout out to them. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get us started here. I'm going to pass the baton and introduce our moderator for today. Natalia, I will go off camera and let you take it from here.
Sounds great. Thank you, Wendy. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today. We are super excited to have this conversation about what's hot in Miami. I am Natalia Gonzalez Vela. I am a VC investment manager here in Miami with Cloud Capital. And we're obviously a VC firm out of here, but we're mostly focused in Latin America, even though we're based out of Miami, which is there's always that running joke that Miami is kind of the capital of Latin America. So, there's definitely that perspective. But I'm super excited to be moderating this conversation with two amazing Miami natives, both funder and founders here. And I will let them firstly introduce themselves. And then from there, we have a couple of prepped questions. We'll go through those, and then we have some time for Q&A at the end. We are around 10 minutes reserved, but as ideas kind of start popping into your head, feel totally free to drop those in the chat, and we'll make sure to get to them. We're trying to keep it fun and casual and fluid. So really feel free to ask us anything. We're here to really give you a flavor of what Miami tech life is, but actually what life in Miami is like too, right? Because they definitely complement each other. So without further ado, Rebecca, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. And it's so interesting. You called out that both Steph and I are Miami natives. That is increasingly rare, but it's true. Her and I have both spent time in other places, and we're super happy that we can call Miami home again. And really, after the last year, we can come back and live here, but also build a career in tech here. That's something that's really changed, and we're excited about. But I work for Miami. I'm the managing director of Miami Angels. We are in Florida's largest angel group, and we invest in early stage software companies. With the Miami in the name, all of our investors are based in South Florida, but we invest in founders all throughout the US. And one of the founders that I'm so excited that we backed is Steph. So I'll hand it over to you to talk about your company.
Great segue. Yeah, so I was born and raised in Miami. am a half Cuban American, have a big Cuban family down here. Spent time in Boston, New York, most recently San Francisco, working in those tech ecosystems. And then about a year and a half ago, moved back home, and I'm super, super excited to be back here and to be a founder in Miami. Ended up starting a company in the beginning of the pandemic and has been a Miami-based company since, which is like a total dream. Quick kind of like one-liner on the company that I started. It's called Huddle. We are in the middle of raising money. Miami Angels is one of our backers, which is awesome. And we're basically a platform that empowers startup builders, so product designers and makers, to connect with startups and help them build for a mix of cash and equity. So basically turning creators into angel investors with their time. Super excited to be here with all of you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rebecca and Stephanie. We are super lucky to have you guys here on the panel today. And kind of with just that in mind, the first question that we have for you guys is, what is going on in Miami that everyone is moving here? From a tech perspective, from a personal perspective, I'm one of those people that moved here. I moved here a year ago from New York City. Originally a Texas girl, grew up in Dallas, Texas, but was born in Guadalajara in Mexico. So I'm kind of all over the map, and now I find myself in Miami, which I never thought I would. And it couldn't have been better, right place, right time. So why don't you guys tell us a little bit more about that, the burgeoning tech ecosystem here?
I can start. What's been really, really interesting for me is, like, obviously in working in New York and San Francisco, most of my networks are in those two places. So when I moved to Miami, it was a personal choice. It was also stemmed from probably an accelerant around the pandemic, an inevitable thing that would have happened that, happened sooner than I expected. And what's been really interesting is seeing all the people in my networks kind of continuing to flock here and reach out to me and ask, like, where should I live? What's going on in Miami? So there's definitely like a gravitational pull that's happening. I think the why is different for everyone, but I do think that, in general, if you work in tech, your options of where you can live have expanded drastically. And I think that looking at quality of life, looking at some of these other factors of choice of living, the options are more available to you, and places like Miami, I think, are more attractive. That being said, though, there's like lots of attractive places to live. Like Austin's a cool place to live, Nashville's a cool place to live, but like why has Miami really become this like hotspot? I really do think that like there's a set of factors that have really positioned Miami to like really capture this growth. Like I think the Mayor Suarez like tweeting, "How can I help?" and tweeting it at someone in tech in that moment in time is not like a random occurrence. Like Mayor Suarez is a product of Miami and is a product of like really like super entrepreneurial people that have always been here, and a lot of creativity. So I think it was just really well positioned, I think, to capture this new kind of geographic resorting that's happening.
Yeah, I'll say too, a little on the history as well. So I came back to Miami to work in tech in 2017, and there was actually kind of an investment in making Miami have more of a thriving tech ecosystem starting back in 2013. So what you saw happen at the tail end of 2020 and really 2021 has all been through those foundational blocks in the previous year. So it wasn't like spontaneous combustion, but it certainly was nowhere near where it is now. So what we saw was a rapid acceleration because there were some foundational blocks there. So we did have some VC funds, like the firm Natalia's with was already around before 2020. There were accelerators, co-working spaces, things like that. And little by little, other investors and founders were moving here. It was certainly kind of, it was like this though, going little by little, and then we just saw that crazy curve at the end of 2020. And I think there were some like the mayor was a huge piece of it. He's the best ambassador for the city. And then there were some things that no one could have predicted or controlled, which we saw happen in other tech hubs, like Steph mentioned, Austin, Nashville, which is cities because of COVID, places where you could be outdoors more, and certain like geographical and political climates that attracted people here. And then the next question that always comes with that is it here to stay? I think like anything, some of the buzz will die out, but I think a lot of the people that moved here are absolutely staying here. I would say the majority are. Many people just came short term, but there were a lot of the people who said, hey, we're moving here, I think have been really happy and decided to stay. And the last thing I'll say too is we're excited to have this conversation with you all, and also not just be cheerleaders and paint it like perfect and pretty, and like we're happy to get granular into what life is like here, because the premise of this conversation is for you to understand it more, and you're exploring moving here, and we want to talk to you to give you a feel for what that's like. But Natalia, you actually have an interesting perspective because you moved here for the first time. So maybe you can talk about what your initial impression was.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I moved here June 2020. So I moved here for this new role right in peak of COVID. I'd never even visited Miami before, and they wouldn't even let me see my apartment because of COVID. But I'm like, okay, let's go. Let's move to Miami. I have been super pleasantly surprised. Part of it was a right place, right time kind of thing, because if Miami started to explode right after I moved here. But I think something that I really want to emphasize is that I thought like, oh, okay, well, this just happened, right? Like Miami became this like tech hub overnight. That is not true. Since I like got to Miami, there's been so much foundational work, so much building blocks that has gone on for years from some of the like Miami OG people that have been investing and making Miami like what it is today for years. And just because of that like intersection or that mix with like COVID and quality of life and oh, great taxes, oh, and there's a beach here, and like, you know, talent, it just kind of, they had an inflection point and it took off. But Miami has really been preparing for this for a long time. And the more I get to know people that have been in this environment and this ecosystem for a while, the more I am impressed and respectful of the work that they have done. As a New Yorker who came down here, because I lived in New York for 4 years, I like the fast lifestyle. I like the hustle. And I'm like, is this really going to be like the pace that I want to be in? And I have been super impressed with the Miami hustle. People around here make things happen very quickly. Like Miami Tech Week happened in like I don't even know how that happened, but it came together because when there's momentum and there's energy and there's passion, like people around here really know how to capitalize on that. And I've been like very, very thankful to be in Miami right now. So that's kind of my 2 cents as someone who transplanted here, as they call it, like the transplants. But now kind of to throw it back to you, Rebecca and Stephanie. So from a tech perspective, what kind of trends are you seeing in Miami? Like what are the trends that are really making this, like you mentioned, Rebecca, not just like a short-term thing, but a long-term tech ecosystem?
Yeah, I can start. So I would say now Miami is very much solidified as another city, like when you go fundraise, even if you're a founder who's not moving your company here, that's totally fine. There's now such a concentration of investors that before it was like you had to go to New York and the Bay Area. And now it's like Austin and Miami as well will be really relevant. So that's something that I think is just like a shift that'll stay. It's definitely been a lot of investors moving here, but there's also been a good amount of founders. There's a lot more openings than ever before. I'm trying to think through trends. Well, there's been a big emphasis on blockchain and cryptocurrency as well. Like we held that big conference here. The mayor's also been really behind that and advocating for that. I think that's one of the biggest kind of themes that we've seen come out of this.
Yeah, I'll add, and I might be biased because I'm running a startup that is really creator focused, and I'm also a designer and a creative. So if there's any creatives on the call, like I think Miami, again, this is not like a recent thing. This is something that's been in the works for a while, has like a really burgeoning like design and creative community. We have Art Basel, which is like the biggest kind of design event of the year. And just generally speaking, it's like a really creative group of people doing a lot of creative things, walk around Design District, and you can pretty probably feel that. So I do think that Miami's pretty poised to have a lot of creator and creative focused startups in tech.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And then kind of just like from my side, from the opportunities that I've been seeing in Miami, really been impressed with like what Miami has been doing to kind of capitalize on or take advantage of creating solutions for what is now called like the new normal, right? I've seen a lot of innovative future of work things going on, or how to do like long-term like wellness and preventative care in a more flexible work environment, or solutions for like a working mom who now has to like work from home and has her kids but also has to cook. And like I've been seeing a lot of Miami-based companies addressing the new reality, and that's been like super exciting, I think, too. Also, I've seen a lot of like larger tech players moving to Miami to start like offices, which I think is going to bring a lot of like talent this way and kind of create a more like recurring, I don't know, cycle of like feeding tech talent into the ecosystem. And then just like from a LATAM perspective, the proximity to Miami to Latin America, I think has also just, there's a lot of buzz right now on Latin America as an emerging market. We're seeing a lot more global players kind of investing money in the region. This was a blockbuster half of the year for LATAM investments at 6.2 billion, biggest ever. So I definitely think that Miami's emergence as a tech hub has contributed to the Latin American ecosystem as well. So lots of fun stuff coming out of Miami, which kind of leads to the next question, which is, what do you guys see as the biggest opportunities for both founders and funders now that Miami is on the rise and really looking to stay relevant in the ecosystem?
I think talent is a big opportunity. We're still at the beginning of it, but I think that there's a bit of a talent gap, and here's why. I don't doubt that we'll attract it though, and we'll be able to. I think partly it just takes time, but most startups. So we talked a little bit about what the startup ecosystem looked like previous to, let's call it Q4 2020. So like pretty small. And that meant that most of the local startups were, and this isn't generalizing, but if you look on average, I would say between 10 and 20 employees. So what that staffing makeup looks like is very senior people. It's the CEO, the CTO, the founders, some operational folks, a few engineers, but you really need senior engineers. We didn't have necessarily the companies that were hiring like 50 junior engineers, because that just requires a more mature organization that can train them and all that. Product managers, user experience designers. There's of course exceptions, but for the most part, we did not have that. So that kind of concentration of talent is not here. It was more in the other big cities, New York and the Bay Area. Now there's a lot of companies who've moved here and are hiring. You look at their job boards and you just see so many listings. You see it a lot in Miami. You see a lot of them in Miami. I think like one question will be something that everyone adopted with the pandemic was decentralization and remote work. So of these companies where the founders are based here, how many positions will actually be in Miami versus not? But I just think over time now we're having more companies mature and grow here, and we'll have more of those positions and bring that talent, but it just takes some time.
Yeah, I would just plus one that. And I do think because of remote work, and because of the fact that it's like a remote workforce that's available to you, no matter where you're sort of building or starting a company, that early like cold start problem and having local talent around is like, I don't think it's a blocker, but I do think as we start to see companies sort of into those later maturity stages, the city and the talent, I think will naturally keep up with that. But it is like, it's something that, is kind of TBD, kind of how much it catches up with it. I do think that top amazing talent follows amazing opportunities. And it feels like having the anchors of like really big established investors as well as founders starting companies here. Those are the kinds of magnets that bring people and bring talent. And obviously, because of all the other lifestyle perks of being in Miami, I don't think there's an attraction problem. It's just a timing. It's just a matter of time thing.
Totally agree with what you both said. And I think something that's really exciting about Miami, as opposed to some of the more established venture or entrepreneurial tech ecosystems like San Francisco, New York, is that since it is kind of on the come up, it's still on the rise, there's still a lot of a nurturing and investment that needs to happen. It's kind of like the early stages of like a startup, right? It's brand new and you really have a chance to like build something here and build out, a community and an ecosystem and a reputation. And so I think it's a really exciting thing to be a part of. But to Rebecca's point, let's not make this all like flowery and good and amazing. There's still some cons to the reality that we're in. For example, the humidity. That's my number one con. I am totally used to heat being from Texas, but humidity, that's really not fun for my hair.
Dry heat is better than humidity.
Exactly. I rather fry than melt, In Texas, you fry. In Miami, you melt. I don't want to fry. But anyway, all jokes aside, what would you ladies say are like still some very real cons of the current tech ecosystem here?
I have a few like that I can, like on the more just like living here, things to consider. Steph, I see you thinking. So do you want me to start with some of that?
Go for it.
So Miami's really spread out. It's similar to LA in that way, if you're familiar. I think the traffic's not quite as bad because I've spent time in LA, but I've never lived there. But I've heard LA is like all day long. It's just kind of back, like non-moving traffic. In Miami, it's just during rush hour, but it's a very spread out city. There's pockets that are walkable, but then like going from one area to another, you definitely need to like Uber, be in a car. It's not right now, every city is known for different things, but I would say it's still very much maturing. It is not the same necessarily as New York and the Bay Area. And for a lot of the people that moved here, that's why they wanted that, the freshness, they talk about the energy. But for example, there's not quite the same culture of angel investing like you hear of in the Bay Area, where it's like everyone is an angel investor and a founder just walks around and they're like, hey, I have this company. And someone's like, can I invest? And like that very just like quick micro checks, and that doesn't really exist here. We don't have a lot of like deep tech businesses. I saw someone ask something about B2B and B2C. I would say there's not a huge differentiation in vertical, but a lot like the talent that is here now is a lot more sales, marketing, creative driven. So that's something to keep in mind if you kind of have like a robotics company or something like that. I know Boston's really well known for that. Trying to think what else downfalls to Miami. Steph, you want to take a turn?
Yeah, sure. The deep tech one is the thing that I sort of like share with folks that are coming from San Francisco or thinking about that move. Like, I think Miami as an ecosystem is more akin to an LA, both in like how you mentioned like physicality, but also like in terms of the startups that sort of are tending to come here and thrive here and have the talent and people around it to like make it happen. I do think we'll likely, as this sort of geographic spread is happening, like different cities might have different kind of specializations and things that just come naturally to them. Like Boston has, some great like deep tech and biotech because their location near MIT and some of these more technical universities, which I think is like, again, like kind of happening all over the country. These things are getting more dispersed, but like specializations are probably bound to continue to be a thing. And I do think on this sort of like deeper tech, like really innovative tech, it's likely still happening, like not really in San Francisco, I would just say like in the Valley. And in places like Austin that sort of have already kind of carved out a little bit of that specialty, in places like Boston, just based on, the universities are there and some of the kind of footing that they have. Yeah, my biggest qualm on like the city of Miami is just like walkability, because I've spent time in Boston. I lived there for 6 years, lived in New York for 4 years, lived in SF for a couple of years, and all had pretty high walkability, which I grew to really love. There are pockets in Miami. I happen to like live in one of them. They exist where you can like bike and walk places, which is kind of the best of all the things. But it's very much a maturing city. It's densifying, and in those denser pockets is where you'll find walkability, and it definitely exists, but it's not as easy to come by as like living in New York. You could pretty much, there's a lot of places you could live where you could access the subway and have like a pretty walkable lifestyle, or bikeable at least, and it's still kind of growing here.
Yeah, and Steph, great point. To add on to that, when we're talking about how it's really spread out, it's also a problem because there's not great public transportation here. So that's why. And then
car ownership is like pretty much a necessary thing if you're living here full time.
You can get by on Uber if you live in one of those denser areas, but you need a car to go from area to area, whether that's Uber or your personal car. And another like really real conversation that we should have is cost of living, especially because I see a lot of you come from the Southeast, the Midwest. So because you'll hear people talk about how cost of living is so great here, but that's really relative. It's cheaper in some ways. I think there's been a lot of change in the last year in pricing, but it's relatively cheaper than New York and the Bay Area. I think less different now. But if you're coming from the Midwest or the Southeast, it is pricier. It's not considered like a very, very cheap to live here. So yeah.
I totally agree with all the points y'all said. I will say the taxes are nice coming from New York City. That is a very real plus. When I like looked at my paycheck and I was like, nice. So I agree with Rebecca that like it's not as I pay the same for food and drinks here than I do in New York. So that was like a big shock to me. But like my apartment, I pay the same I did in New York for a lot more, right? And like my taxes, it's all great. I will say another thing that for me, like I lived in Boston for 4 years, in New York for 4 years. So getting a car was kind of annoying because it is not walkable. But I think the thing that really gets me is the parking. My goodness, the parking. I cannot park anywhere if you don't know how to parallel park. It's impossible to park in the city, and I didn't. So that was something I had to learn. And you have to pay for parking everywhere. Like in Texas, parking is free. So it's just a much bigger area. But that's a fun little thing I discovered that came when having a car. But we can totally talk about that more in the Q&A if y'all want. But moving on, I think we should move on to the next question. Was if you are a funder coming to Miami, if you are a founder coming to Miami, who are some people? What are some organizations? What are some events or places or things that you should know, you should be aware of to kind of get up to speed on the tech ecosystem? What are the resources available? What can one do to get up to that Miami pace?
I'm gonna give the immediate shout out that comes to mind, and this is genuine. It's not just because she's on the call, but like Rebecca would literally be the first person I would tell you to connect with. She's one of the first people that I connected with when I started Huddle here. And literally like I trademark most helpful person in Miami, and the Miami Angels group in general, like just getting connected with all of those folks. I think it's like kind of just foundational, like that's the group to meet first.
Thank you, Steph.
I second that. That's totally a fact. So
I'm sitting here like jotting things down because I actually have a bunch and I don't want to miss important names. Maybe I can come back to it. I'll say one on just like community perspective that's like the most open and a great starting place is Refresh Miami. that, believe it or that was started, I think it was started by Brian Breslin, shout out to Brian. And I think it was like in the early 2000s, and it was this, they like would meet in someone's living room, and now it's like, I guess thousands of people, but it's just a community tech organization. Well, I shouldn't say just, but meaning it's very open, it's very welcoming, and they do a lot of tech news. So I recommend following them. They have some great reporters that are talking about the companies and the individuals in the ecosystem. But I'll share some other names in the chat as well.
Yeah, okay, perfect, Rebecca, because I also have some like names that come to mind, or probably like overlapping on a couple of names that I'm sure you kind of have a
Yeah,
more
what are yours?
I'm thinking of like, well, the thing is like, should I just like start calling people out? I'm thinking of Natalia. I forgot her, like not me, a different Natalia.
Martinez.
Yes.
They're happy hour. Natalia is an amazing connector.
She does all the events. She does all the happy hours. They have like it every other week, and so much of the tech community comes there, which is super fun.
Yeah, so that one is every other Wednesday at the Freehold in Wynwood.
Right. I feel like Juan Pablo Capello also hosts a bunch of events here and there, very active in the tech scene. Endeavor also has been doing a lot of tech events lately. Obviously Miami Angels. And then like once you get to know more people in the tech community in Miami, there's a bunch of WhatsApp groups. We love WhatsApp here because it's very Latino. I feel like it just, and so there's a WhatsApp group for everything: book club, wine tasting, tennis, biking. And it's really cool because you get to meet people in the tech community while doing something fun and outdoorsy and a hobby that you enjoy. So it's like establishing those professional and personal relationships. That's kind of what comes to my mind right now.
Yeah, you a lot.
Oh, go ahead, Rebecca.
So Endeavor is it's programmatic, so they do mentorship for companies, and they do they'll do like boot camps for certain type of companies based on a vertical. So that's really interesting. If they do one in your vertical, that's a good one. Miami Tech Life is great. I love how people are writing stuff in too. This is awesome. I don't know that Venture Cafe is still doing their gatherings, but previously, pre-pandemic, that was an awesome one too. The team behind that is fantastic. But yeah, Miami Tech Life is it was founded by Damian Bellumio, and it's a bunch of chats. The main one, there's like a generalist one, and then there's a bunch of channels. I think they're on Telegram now because they got too big on WhatsApp. But it's like there are certain lifestyle ones like cycling, book club, and then there's like Miami Deal Flow. I know a founder that just kind of posted there like, hey, we're raising, I mean, I think there's a lot of stories like this, but she wrote like, hey, we're starting our fundraising. She met a bunch of investors through there.
For sure.
So yeah.
Cool. I was just going to add, and this is probably only relevant if you are currently in Miami, but maybe relevant long-term as well, is that the week after next is Miami Hack Week, which is being put on by a group of Miami folks, including Lucy Guo, who is also one of the first people I got connected with here back in Capital. She's one of our investors as well. And yeah, there's a whole group of people that are putting on like a week-long hackathon here, which is going to be really fun.
Awesome. Okay, well, at this point, guys, those were all of our prepped questions. So if you guys have any specific questions about literally anything that has to do with Miami, please feel free to throw them in the chat, and we'll just kind of start addressing them for the like next 10 minutes, 15 minutes that we have left, and then we'll do a quick little wrap up. So feel free to ask anything.
Natalia, we've got a couple of questions over in the QA as well.
Okay, perfect. Let's see. So Rebecca, it seems like these that I'm seeing here are for you. Like, how can people get connected to Miami Angels in your upcoming events?
We're really active on Twitter and LinkedIn. So the way we work, I didn't explain it too much in our intro, but we're a membership organization, and all of our members are accredited investors. So if you're an angel investor or you have a VC fund, we have a lot of VC funds in our group as well. then you would be a fit to be a member. And what we do is source the deals and share deals together, as well as expertise, because our members lead the due diligence as well, and then we'll invest as a group into a deal. So that's on the investor side. You can go to our website, www.miamiangels.vc. There's more info on membership there, but you can also email us, and I'll send you more detailed information on investing with us. We don't take carrier management, just annual membership dues. So that's why it works really well, especially for a lot of funds, since the business models can closely align. And then on the founder side, we invest in software companies. Once the initial product market fit, so you have some users, customers, product is developed up through the seed stage. Then, so that was and events. So our deals are closed to just our members, but then we do community events, and we actually have a recurring one with Endeavor and Women in Miami Tech. So that's another great organization if you're for females in tech. And what it is it was founded by Maria Durchi, who is also with Refresh Miami. She's an amazing connector as well. And she so the three of us kind of put this together, invite our communities, and it's very casual. We just go somewhere in Wynwood and we connect. It's open format, and we're playing around with different ideas now to do more structured events as well. So that's going to be about every other month, and we always just post it on our Twitters and LinkedIn whenever those happen. So I think a good way is to follow Miami Angels. I'll put our name in the chat.
Perfect.
And I saw a question, and because I keep mentioning the neighborhood, about like, where has the tech community concentrated? And it was kind of spread out before between a few neighborhoods called Brickell, Wynwood, a little bit Coral Gables, Miami Beach. Those are all still relevant, but I would say it's very much now concentrated in Wynwood. So a lot of tech events, companies have their offices in the Wynwood area, and you've probably heard about it or visited it if you've just been on a trip to Miami, because it's also our kind of arts district. That's where all those really cool painted murals are. So it's a very creative, interesting area.
Perfect. I totally agree with that. There was a question here about thoughts on remote work, and I guess how that applies to Miami as well. Like, what are the thoughts here? Do we think it's here to stay? Do we think it's a temporary thing? Any thoughts there, ladies?
I don't think anyone like knows for sure what is going to happen with remote work, but my take on this is that talent drives, like, top talent is what drives what companies ultimately decide to allow to do. Like, unlimited vacation days is not something that companies did not very long ago, and now suddenly every tech company that wants to attract talent does. And so I do see remote work as like very quickly becoming one of those things where like companies that want to attract the top people like need to offer a remote work option. That only becomes true though if like genuinely the like, you know, top talent in the world like actually wants to work remote, which is the TBD part. I think everything that I've read and kind of seen on it is that like there is a majority there that wants flexible work options, either entirely remote or like partly remote. So I do think that natural kind of market dynamic will happen where more companies offer it, more talent expects it, and we will actually really see remote work stick around in a really real way for a long time. You know, how that impacts Miami also is TBD, but the fact that like Miami's like cool factor is really high. A lot of young people want to live here. really plays into like, if you can work and live anywhere, where do you choose to live? And I do think that like Miami, again, is pretty well positioned to be an attractive place where particularly young people, a lot of Gen Z people, just young people in general want to be. And if they can kind of demand that in the places that they choose to work, whether that's for a Miami-based company or elsewhere, I think that it's going to drive. It's already been driving, like, I think, pretty massive population growth here.
Totally. I think that that's totally true, and those are a lot of good insights, and kind of to like what I had alluded to earlier. I'm seeing a lot of like companies in Miami kind of trying to tackle the whole like remote work from varying angles. So we'll see what ends up happening. I guess no one has that exact crystal ball, but I saw another question in the chat. I'm sorry, I think I skipped over it, but it's about what advice would you give a LATAM founder raising money in Miami and expanding operations in the US, wanting to have an HQ in Miami? And that's kind of, I see that a lot in my day-to-day work, since we're a $60 million fund, principally focused on Series A investments focused in LATAM, with the exception of Venezuela y Brazil. So when I see founders that are trying to raise in the US from Latin America, I think the first thing I always give them, also, feel free to look me up on LinkedIn. And if you want to have a chat about this more personally, always happy to help out LATAM founders raising in the US. I'm very passionate about that. I would say do your homework, like in terms of like best practices around raising norms in the United States, around what KPIs are going to ask, what types of assessments, the way to do a concise, clear, polished pitch. There are differences in communications and how to reach people between LATAM and the United States. So that's just like step one. From there, it's really about, it's about like knocking on doors, but I would say like knocking strategically. And there are a lot of different ways that one could go about that. First one being like, personalization, understanding, working your network. If you can have any type of warm intro, that's already huge. I think from a US raising perspective, honestly, just anywhere. And then there's a lot of small things that I think make a big difference when I talk to founders, with follow-ups or how proactive they are about getting information, or like I said, there's many things that come to my mind. I don't want to take up too much time here on that kind of niche question, but happy to talk offline about any or all of that. Let me see here what else I got in the chat. Stephanie, can you shed some light on your customer adoption strategy when you initially launched?
Sure. So we did two things really early on that were big drivers, I think, of like really quick traction for us. One is, so we're like a marketplace of sorts. We have like a big community of creators, and then we have founders come in and we kind of connect founders with teams of these creators. So we actually built out the creator side first, and we just built a community. And that was like kind of the lightweight way to start. And then we started just really like, incentivizing referrals. We found that our community actually had a lot of founder friends, and we're getting more work that they could handle or things like that, and it started to drive customers. The other thing that we did early on was just like, we realized that content was going to be a really big, important thing. So we launched on Product Hunt, and like did all the things to get us like on the front page of Product Hunt, and just got like inundated with founders, and just realized that founders as a customer kind of hang out in a couple places. They hang out on Product Hunt, they hang out in the WeWorks of the world. Like there's pretty targeted places that they hang out, and talent is such a kind of real pain point for them that, offering this solution, like we found that it caught on really quickly.
Awesome, thank you. And then another question I see here on the chat is, what advice do we have for a pre-revenue company? What is a reasonable fundraising ask at that level? Anybody want to kick that off?
Yeah, so I wrote back and I said, I recommend starting small. I mean, it's hard to give advice without having like seen the actual business and where it's in, but like my generic advice, again, take it with a grain of salt without me having seen the business, but is start small. get some initial traction, and then raise a larger seed round. And the reason I say that is, you want to avoid a lot of dilution early on. So by just having a little bit more traction, you can get a much better valuation and kind of avoid that dilution.
Perfect. Nope, totally agree. I also see a lot of pre-revenue companies raising more like from a direct circle, you know, with are kinder, a closer circle, which are kinder on terms and timelines and all these kind of stuff. So totally understand that not everyone has like access to that network, but always kind of like Rebecca said, protect your dilution, because the more you grow, like you want to make sure that you still have a sizable amount of your company. And especially when you get to a Series A, Series B level, investors look that you have a sizable chunk of your company because they're investing in you, right? Just as much as they're investing in the company, they want to make sure you have that ownership, motivation, and control. Let's see if I missed any questions. I don't see any more.
I see a few on talent in between, like earlier in the chat and one in the Q&A, because questions are coming in from both.
I see. I didn't see the Q&A. Perfect. What do you see as a sustainable source of tech talent for Miami over time? Relying on transplants doesn't seem like it can be sustained over a long period of time.
So on the question of talent, I think this is an opportunity area for us also. I mentioned like just the fact that we don't have like really large pools of very specific design and engineering talent. But apart from that is we're lacking kind of a central place. Steph, I'm curious if you've hired a few roles that you've tried locally or not, and like where you've gone. But people have come to me with like, hey, I'm hiring 50 roles in Miami. And that's something that is an opportunity area for us, because there's not really like one place that we can go. I think there's a lot of smaller community efforts. So I'll give an example. I founded, just as a side hustle, something called Talent Scout back in 2019. And it was just really through my network in Miami. I told people, send me resumes of people you hear about. I'll vet them and then I'll send it out to founders. But that's very small and curated. I would send out 2 a month. That doesn't solve for the people that are hiring a ton of roles. That is one resource. It's still going. And now the team at IDA Ventures, which is Leanne Buchanan, who founded Venture Cafe, is overseeing that project, and they're helping grow it. There's a lot of great talent coming out of FIU as well. But there's, you know, universities are designed to educate. They're not necessarily recruiting firms. So the way to meet their talent is kind of through posting on a job board. So it's not always the very easiest experience for employers. There's Venture for America, which is a national organization, but we have a chapter here, which is all about taking university graduates and placing them into tech companies. So there's a few like disparate things, but I think that there needs to be kind of one person or organization bringing people together at a citywide level, which we don't have yet. Steph and Natalia, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add is that, like, I think if you look at any sort of city that successfully created like a tech ecosystem, it's a mix of majority imports, so or transplants that stick around, and also like just manufacturing talent, which is a really cold way of just saying like having universities and places where talent is just sort of coming out into the workforce already in that place, and getting their first job straight out of college in that city. So we need both of those in place. I mean, like SF has the kind of Stanford and the, you know, then like the majority again is just imports though. Like I think having those anchors, having those magnets for top talent, whether it's their first job or later job, moving to Miami, is really probably what a lot of this is going to be. But I do think we could do more to sort of make sure that all of the amazing people that are graduating from Miami universities are, you know, finding a place and a track to get into these tech roles that are going to be, frankly, like needing these new grad talent. So I think there is like a couple bridges and things like that that people are building. This is not like a new thing. Like I know Saif Ishouf, who's like, working closely with the mayor and is like leading up Venture Miami, is like partnering with FIU, and there's a lot of these bridges being put in place. So I do think there's a lot of action around it.
And I remembered Refresh Miami has a job board both for candidates looking and employers hiring. And then we also have boot camps here that bring out UX and engineering talent. Those are called WinCode and Ironhack.
Yeah. It's interesting because it is sort of part of this larger movement that like tech is just becoming a more mainstream option for folks. There's lots of non-technical roles in tech companies. So in a lot of ways, there's just a lot of bridging to be done, like in general, in helping, people in other non-tech kind of roles or workforce, like find their way into tech. There's a lot of talented people here who might not self-identify as being in tech, or haven't found their path into it, but would, do really well in some of the new tech companies that are hiring.
Perfect. Super helpful. Thanks so much, ladies. So this question is a little bit broader. I don't know if there's a way to kind of disseminate it, but it's like, what do you estimate the breakdown is of companies by business model, B2B versus B2C, and or other verticals? I'm assuming in terms of like of opportunities in Miami. So any insights there? Mine are a lot more LATAM focused. So
without having data, I can't say a number because I haven't seen the data, but very anecdotally from what I see, I wouldn't say there's a large concentration of one versus the other. Maybe B2C, if anything. But I think it's pretty evenly split.
Perfect. And then this next question is, what % of influx of companies are we saying that are just doing satellite office versus actually with teams versus actually moving HQs here? Any insights there?
Again, without seeing the data, it's hard, but a lot of like really large companies made headlines that moved to Colorado, to Austin. We didn't see any like that, or not. I shouldn't say any. We saw fewer like that. But then as far as startups go, I would say it's been a lot of founders moving here and building businesses here, and then saying we're going to hire, and employees can either be based here or somewhere else because we're a remote workforce. There's been some satellite offices, but you'd be surprised. It's a lot of people wanting to establish HQ here. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I feel like I've seen a lot of investors and firms opening offices in Miami, which is really like just like catching the signal that there is going to be a lot of startups happening here, which is a really positive signal, of course. But for like some of these big companies to move entire headquarters here, like these kind of talent gaps and problems that we're talking about, those maturity stages, right? Like these are the things that those companies are thinking about and looking at. And they very well could see gaps in that today. What I think is really exciting is that like if investors are sort of seeing that signal and opening investment offices here and founders are coming, is that you really do have this sort of like a lot of newness and a lot of like early, like, setting the original roots here. And then like we will start to see sort of like the fruits of that over time, which I think will sort of start to bridge and mend those talent problems and then like probably attract those bigger HQs. It's like a little bit of just like that maturity cycle. But I do kind of feel like if I had to like sort of pick where just me personally would want to be, like I love being in those early days anywhere. Like, I think the people that are attracted to Miami right now are the people that like would want to get early on a startup and like kind of be there in those early days and get the upside of that. So it just feels like as a city, we're kind of, I think one of you guys already said this, we're kind of in that startup stage level.
For sure. And I think it's also really interesting that I'm not only seeing some like big tech companies move or put some like offices in Miami, but we also saw like Blackstone put some offices in Miami, like Goldman Sachs moved their wealth management, a big chunk of their wealth management, the majority, to Miami. So you're seeing like a lot of big players, also not just only tech focused, moving to Miami, and all of that is just causing ripple effects, right? So Miami as a whole is getting a lot of attention and investment from different sectors, and all of that is going to feed into talent and the long-term development of the city. So interesting from several perspectives. And last question I see here, hopefully I'm not missing another one. Yeah, last question I see here just to wrap up is there any organization centered around blockchain in Miami? I know a couple of startups, I know we had Crypto Week, but is there do you guys know if there's like a central organization?
There's a handful, but I know someone, Sharon wrote back to Lucinda. I can't think of any specific right now.
Yeah, I am not in that space, so I don't have any specifics. I am like, I would say like, Austin Bunsen and like the Quick Node folks, like if you're in blockchain and like, want to kind of plug in there, I feel like, Austin's a great kind of like community builder. Obviously is also building Quick Node, which is like, really a blockchain company. So I would recommend kind of following him and following updates there.
Perfect. Well, Wendy, I am not sure if you had some concluding remarks. If there's any more Q&A, I'm super open to answering any questions offline. Rebecca and Stephanie, thank you so much for your insights and your time. And I will hand it back over to you, Wendy, to kind of wrap us up.
Thanks, Natalia. Rebecca, you guys, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation today. I'm taking notes and thinking maybe I should take a trip to Miami. I put a link in the chat. We'd love to get your feedback. You can either click on that link or the QR code that's on the screen. We are always looking for ways to make these kinds of conversations more valuable to our community members. So please feel free to give us your feedback. We really greatly appreciate it. We will be posting the recording of this on the All Raise website, and we'll let you know when that's available. Hopefully we'll get that up for you all tomorrow. In the meantime, please enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks again so much for joining us. And really, again, to our panel, thank you so much for sharing your insights, and really looking forward to seeing what's next for Miami. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone. Thank you.
Bye.